cheap hotel not too far away from here?
Try the Bell and Dragon. They might take you in. It's about a quarter of a mile down the road that way.
Thanks.
Please come in.
I saw the notice in your window.
Yes, I know.
I was wondering about a room.
It's all ready for you, my dear.
I was on my way to the Bell and Dragon, but the notice in your window happened to catch my eye.
My dear boy, why don't you come in out of the cold?
How much do you charge?
5 and 6 pence a night. If that is too expensive, then perhaps I can reduce it just a tiny bit. Do you desire an egg for breakfast? Eggs are expensive at the moment. It would be 6 pence less without the egg.
5 and 6 pence is fine. I should like very much to stay here.
I knew you would. Do come in. Just hang in there and let me help you with your coat. You see, it isn't very often I get the pleasure of taking a visitor into my little nest.
I should have thought you'd be simply swamped with applicants.
Oh, I am, dear. Of course I am. But you see, I'm inclined to be just a teeny-weeny bit choosy in particular, if you see what I mean.
Ah, yes.
But everything is always ready in this house, day and night, just on the off chance that an acceptable young gentleman will come to the door. And it is such a pleasure, my dear, such a very great pleasure, when someone comes to the door who is just exactly right, like you. Come on. This room is all yours. The morning sun comes right through the window, Mr. Perkins. It is Mr. Perkins, isn't it?
No, it's Weaver.
Oh, Mr. Weaver. How nice. I've put a warm water bottle in between the sheets to air them out. Mr. Weaver, isn't it such a comfort to have a warm water bottle in strange bed with clean sheets? Don't you agree? And you can light the gas fire if you feel chilly.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much.
I'm so glad you appeared. I was beginning to get worried.
You mustn't worry about me.
And what about supper, my dear? Did you manage to get anything to eat before you came here?
I'm not a bit hungry, thank you. I think I'll just go to bed as soon as possible because I've got to go to the office rather early tomorrow.
Very well, then. I'll leave you now so that you can unpack. But would you mind, before you go to bed, to pop into the sitting room and sign the guest book? Everyone has to do that because it's the law of the land, and we don't want to go breaking any laws at this stage in the proceedings, do we?
Christopher Mulholland? Gregory Temple? Such charming boys. They somehow seem familiar.
They do? How interesting.
I'm almost positive I've heard those names before somewhere. Isn't that odd? Maybe it was in the newspapers. They weren't famous in any way, were they? I mean, famous cricketers or footballers or something like that?
Famous? Oh no, I don't think they were famous. But they were incredibly handsome, both of them. I can promise you that. They were tall and young and handsome, both of them. Just exactly like you.
Look here. This last entry is over 2 years old.
Is it?
Yes, indeed. And Christopher Mulholland's nearly a year before that. More than 3 years ago.
Dear me, I never would have thought it. How time does fly away from us all, doesn't it, Mr. Wilkins?
It's Weaver. W-E-A-V-E-R.
Of course it is. How silly of me. I do apologize. In one ear and out the other, that's me, Mr. Weaver.
You know something? Something that's really quite extraordinary about all of this?
No, dear, I don't.
Well, you see, both these names, Mulholland and Temple, I not only seem to remember each one of them separately, so to speak, but somehow or other, in some peculiar way, they both appear to be sort of connected together as well, as though they were both famous for the same sort of thing, if you know what I mean. Like, well, like Dempsey or Tooney, for example, or Churchill and Roosevelt.
How amusing. But come over here now, dear, and sit beside me on the sofa, and I'll give you a nice cup of tea and a ginger biscuit before you go to bed.
You really shouldn't bother. I didn't mean for you to do anything like that. I'm almost positive it was in the newspapers I saw them. I'll think of it in a second. I'm sure I will. Now, wait a minute. Wait just a minute. Mulholland. Christopher Mulholland? Wasn't that the name of the Eton schoolboy who was on a walking tour through the West Country? And then all of a sudden...
Milk and sugar?
Yes, please. And then all of a sudden...
Eton schoolboy? Oh no, my dear, that can't possibly be right, because my Mr. Mulholland was definitely not an Eton schoolboy. He was a Cambridge undergraduate. Come over here now and sit next to me and warm yourself in front of the lovely fire. Come on, it's here. It's all ready for you. How nice and cozy, isn't it? Mr. Mulholland was a great one for his tea. Never in my life have I seen anyone drink as much tea as dear, sweet Mr. Mulholland.
I suppose he left fairly recently.
Left? But my dear boy, he never left. He's on the 4th floor with Gregory Temple, both of them together. How old are you, my dear?
17.
17? Oh, it's the perfect age. Mr. Mulholland was also 17, but I think he was a trifle shorter than you are. In fact, I'm sure he was. And his teeth weren't quite so white. You have the most beautiful teeth, Mr. Weaver. Did you know that?
They're not as good as they look. They've got simply masses of fillings in their nuts at that.
Mr. Temple, of course, was a little older. He was actually 28, and yet I never would have guessed it if he hadn't have told me. Never in my whole life. There wasn't a blemish on his body.
A what?
His skin was just like a baby's.
That parrot. You know something? It had me completely fooled when I first saw it through the window. I could have sworn it was alive.
Alas, no longer.
It's most terribly clever the way it's been done. It doesn't look in the least bit dead. Who did it?
I did.
You did?
Yes, and have you met my little Basil as well?
Good gracious me. How absolutely fascinating. It must be most terribly difficult to do a thing like that.
Not in the least. I stuff all my little pets myself when they pass away. Will you have another cup of tea?
No, thank you.
You did sign the book, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
That's good, because later on if I happen to forget what you were called, then I could always come down here and look it up. I still do that almost every day with Mr. Mulholland and Mr.
Temple. Gregory Temple. Excuse my asking, but haven't there been any other guests here in the past few years?
No, my dear, only you.